Hi, everyone, and thanks for staying with us. Wow, time really flies as we come to the last session of the day. In this session, we will bring to you Penang, fusion of digital and heritage, in collaboration with Digital Penang, and this will be moderated by Mr. Tony Yeoh, CEO of Digital Penang. The floor is yours, Mr. Tony.
Welcome to this session. I'm Tony Yeoh, CEO of Digital Penang. Penang is sometimes known as the Silicon Valley of Malaysia. We have over 50 years of experience in 50 years of experience in electronics and engineering manufacturing with many leading MNCs such as Intel, Keysight, Motorola, Bosch, and now new players in the Meditech devices like B. Brown, Boston Scientific, and Abbott's Lab. Because of all this ecosystem, we have a lot of engineer entrepreneurs that have also set up their new companies such as Pentamaster, Great Tech, Inari, Globetronics, and many more, and forms a very vibrant ecosystem to support many of the multinational companies. The Chief Minister set up Digital Penang this year with the vision of Penang 2030. Penang 2030, in his view, is to set up and make sure that Penang becomes a state where it is not just a physically vibrant environment, but also digitally plugged into the economy of the world. So the aspects of the digital economy is something that's driven by Digital Penang, other than in the four pillars of digital infrastructure, digital community, digital government, and digital economy. Today, our focus of our discussion is very much around digital economy. Invest Penang has for years led much of the investment, bringing in the multinationals and the FDI into Penang, and has done a great job in making Penang become the best investment destination in Malaysia. Our job in Digital Penang is to focus on developing local enterprises such as the SMEs and the large local companies, as well as startups, to go digital as well as to go international. And today our discussion is to talk about how Penang is shifting gear into going digital, and also not forgetting its heritage charm in being a UNESCO World Heritage City. Today, I'm going to have three panelists with me to discuss the digital ecosystem in Penang and how it is becoming a vibrant investment destination. I'd like to introduce, so the ecosystem that we have is basically around key startups. And I'd like to introduce Mei Tan, who is the founder of Scoopoint and Innovative Plus, a co-working space incubator and a startup mentor. She's also the director of Asia Green Group, a property development and timber manufacturing company. Mei is a TEDx speaker and an award-winning CEO, and is focused on helping traditional brick and mortar companies owe family money to transform itself and go into the new digital opportunities. Also on the panel, we have Mr. Howie Chang, who is the founder of Forward School, a revolutionary technology and future skills school based in Penang, a serial entrepreneur himself, and previously a director of product management for RedMart in Singapore. And lastly, we have Mr. Hamdan Abdul Majeed, who is the CEO of Think City Northern Region, an urban regeneration agency of Khazanah, Malaysia, providing urban policy thinking and implementing innovative urban solutions. Recognized as a thought leader in urban development by World City Summit and awarded the Eisenhower Fellowship. So he will talk about the livable environment. Under the theme of Penang, a fusion of digital and heritage, we will discuss 3 topics as to why Penang is well positioned to capture opportunities in the digital future. So we'll begin this conversation by asking Mei about the digital ecosystem that we have in Penang. So Mei, tell us a bit more about Scoopoint and Innovative Plus and what are you doing in the digital ecosystem in Penang?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mei Tan, founder of Scoopoint and also Innovative Plus. So Scoopoint, we started as a co-working space and also an incubator center. Of course, with this pandemic, currently we are moving towards more of online mentorship and also online courses at the moment. So we particularly mentor and invest into some of the local startups and businesses here. We help to encourage more people to kickstart a business from idea to actual businesses. So our mentorship is from very, like seed fund, like a very beginning of the startup. So starting off foundational businesses and also mentorship program, and eventually move them, or if they fit into certain criteria and potential, then we will actually connect them with our angel investors and also our Innovative Plus members. So Innovative Plus is a platform for Asia's next gen of family business leader to come together to learn, to explore investment opportunities and also connecting and share resources. So hence, from Scoopoint, where we can, nurture the new startup, new talents, and new innovation, and then we bring together to our next gen members of Innovative Plus, where we can connect both from the ideas to people who can actually invest or actually utilize the innovation. Yeah.
Thanks, Mei. So it seems like a very exciting work that you're doing. And you've been working with a lot of old rich family businesses across Asia. In terms of this old money, how do you convince them to invest into new digital opportunities?
Well, I think, to be honest, it's a very challenging, a challenging aspect to actually getting the, traditional businesses or entrepreneur to invest into the new technology. I think hence I started with actually the next gen, meaning the key person for the next, in line that, taking over the family businesses or the family wealth. So hence, because most of the next gen has more exposure and also connectivity with all the, technology innovations that we can see and we can actually use it every single day compared to, the older generation where they have a bit limitation on exploring this part of technology innovation. So hence, going forward, we need to actually educate and get more of the next gen to be involved into this part of ecosystem, where they can learn and where they can see the potential investment as well as actually, adopt into innovation and technology. So that's part of what innovation are doing as well. Yeah.
Right. So I guess in the built environment space, Hamdan, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of property owners and stuff like that. How do you convince them to set up and turn their properties into building and catering for startups?
Probably I will give a slightly bigger context. First and foremost, I think thank you for inviting us to join this panel. I think City has been involved in Penang over the last decade, where we've been instrumental working with the state in terms of renewing and repositioning Georgetown. I think as you had seen in the video earlier, how Georgetown and Penang has been transformed and has become us like, we were not in the radar screen prior to 2008, 2009, but today we pretty much is a go-to place. Now, as Penang becomes an attractive destination for visitors, and we have been an attractive destination not only for people who are coming here to just have a place where they call to take a short break, but Penang has always been sort of like a place to go to if you talk about investing. And over the last 5 decades, as Tony, you had said earlier, that we have charted a journey where that today Penang is known as a destination for technology. In fact, it's much well known as a Silicon Valley of the East. And over the last 5 decades, we have built depth of ecosystem around the whole E&E and related industries, whether it's in medtech or whether it's in aviation and so on. But as over the last decade, what we have seen has been that there has been an increased number of new ventures, a lot of newer interest from the younger generation in the space of starting up new ventures. There's been an increased number of people who have started to look at providing new types of services. Mei Tan has been in the landscape, and Howie has come back, and so on. So this is a kind of change that we have and seen, and that number continues to increase by the year. In fact, one of the things that we started in 2009, encouraging building owners to think about restoring it back and instead of leaving it to stagnate and decay, by incentivizing and providing grants. Today, they have actually, you will have seen in Georgetown, you can find a plethora of different kind of ventures, whether it's tech, whether it's arts, whether it's design, whether it's something to do with culinary. There's a whole spectrum of new ventures that have come. And then, in fact, we have seen a huge increase in renewed entrepreneurship energy that has sort of like has created a momentum for Penang to all of a sudden emerge now as a destination for potential place for you to do your startups, and also for local companies and local ventures or local participants also to think of this as a place to as a hub. Now, one of the key things that we notice is that as countries and economies evolve, no longer that we are in an age where cities are competing. No longer we are in an environment where countries are competing. Rather, the fault line of competition is at cities. And when cities compete, the key factors that distinguish themselves is what they already have, which is their location, which is their natural nature, and both with the physical nature as well as the intangible nature that is present. And also the kind of ecosystem that is present. And that is what you compete with. And I think Penang is well positioned in terms of ecosystem. 5 decades of technology-based manufacturing has created a large pool of engineering-related talent, services, and providers. In terms of location as a hub, people like living in Penang. It provides a different option, particularly for families. Especially those who are young and who are starting up their families, and so this has become a hub. And we think we are also part of a global ecosystem. So in that context, I think a lot of effort that we are focusing is about creating the right enabling environment that will improve and enhance the livability of Penang. So one of the key things that we have done over the last decade is to create that brand proposition that Penang offers and promises. And that has now started to yield results.
Right, great. So we have entrepreneurs here. We have a great livable environment. So Howie, what do you think is the missing element that you will want to convince investor, but that Penang is the destination for digital ecosystem.
I think, yeah, thanks, Tony, for inviting, as well as Hamdan, Penang, for organizing this talk. So for us, I mean, we are, before I go to that, just a bit of a background. Basically, Forward School is a tech school of a certain kind, right? Where our mission is basically to bridge the widening digital skills gap globally, right? By making quality tech education accessible to all, and also helping companies to enable their workforce to reskill. And we have our physical campus here located right in the UNESCO Heritage Core of Georgetown, Penang. And I always like to tell people we try to encapsulate and harness the power of the future and the romance of the past, right? Being very much here in Georgetown. And this is where we start, but our focus is really in Southeast Asia. We have quite a number of programs, primarily in the software engineering industry, as well as future skills sector. So in regards to your question in terms of how we can continue to kind of attract more talents and what's potentially missing, I think it's not just Penang, but I think today's talent development teams really is currently facing a tough reality, right? Tried and true ways of doing business are being rapidly upended by new technologies, by new competitors, and sky-high customer expectations, especially in this digital world. And to respond and thrive, organizations need digitally savvy, future-fluent leaders who are agile, and not just that, they need to be strategic, they need to be data-driven and resilient, and they need them now. So that means it's time to kind of really take a look at a new look at talent development. This is of course accelerated by the pandemic, where the past few months we have experienced. It basically altered the entire talent and learning landscape as well. Organizations, they have to transition to remote workers. They have to they have to mobilize others, and in some cases, businesses will have to need to completely pivot their entire business model, mostly from offline to online. So some of the changes we are experiencing now will continue well into the future. And therefore, our talent and learning strategies must reflect this. And I think Penang is experiencing the same. I think like what Hamdan has mentioned earlier, I think Penang, for as long as we can remember, has been extremely strong in the manufacturing and in the semicon and the E&E sector, which is fantastic. But at the same time, I think to kind of go along with the aspirations of our youth today, there needs to be also an emphasis, and I think it gives us a tremendous opportunity for growth in the digital sector, especially in the digital services sector.
Right. So I guess in Penang, we've had successes in the first wave of startups like Job Street, which is now across Southeast Asia. And then we have Exabytes, PictoCharts, Deliver It, and Table App, which has been bought over, invested by Fund Now in Taiwan. So Mei, in your view, what are we doing to sustain this momentum in the next wave of startups in Penang?
I think, there's a next, in general, I think for the first wave, what they did well is that I think most of them, are actually looking into sustainable business model instead of rushing, into getting, investment too fast. In my opinion, Exabytes, they all like plan, and also it's a sustainable business model. And until today, they are looking into that kind of space, and that's what I think investors are now looking for, a more sustainable and profitable type of business model for any of the startups. And I think Penang has that kind of quality in terms of the entrepreneurship. And what keep the momentum, I think, we do need to encourage more of the ecosystem play, in this state, where we need to focus more of just now Howie has mentioned about talent, get more education and talent involved into what's the new what's about all these startups and how can they actually come up with a better sustainable business model. And secondly, I think with this pandemic, it does affect in terms of the momentum of people actually want to get on board to actually start a startup. So because less event, less activities that actually spur all this, spur the people in this island, in this community about startups. So we used to have events every week, activity every week to do sharing, to encourage more startups, and also to learn from the existing first startup, what they have done it right or wrong. So then again, is this thing has been losing for this few, definitely during this pandemic, and we do need more mentorship and experts that we can actually connect the businesses, the actual businesses or traditional businesses, entrepreneurship, to the up and coming startups, and also where we can attract more funding and also investor looking into the new startup. But I personally think Penang is a great place for both. First wave we have a lot of I would say more of the software, e-commerce type of startup, and we start to see more of the second wave or third wave are coming in to more of the hardware startup in Penang. I think Penang has that both balance that we actually need. So definitely, moving forward with this, we definitely need these few elements, to actually cater and also boost the momentum of the Penang startup scene.
Right. So picking up on that point about us having the heritage of hardware engineering, software engineering skills, and then now the new startups I'm beginning to see, like in AI or even in warehouse robotics, even the agri-tech IoT and stuff like that. So Howie, how has that talent development pool changed to respond to that kind of change in the startup nature?
Yeah, I think I've covered that a bit earlier as well, right? There's no doubt that whether is it talent development teams or HR teams, they are currently really facing it's a tough reality, and some of this which they will have to grapple, especially in this period of time. But I think I'm seeing some positive signs as well. And for me, I would kind of advise organizations to basically focus on a few things, right? And one of it is basically to skill up and to increase the digital fluency of your organizations. What this kind of really means is basically, I think across board, we will have to sort of help leaders of all levels to harness the power of technology and data, which is what a Forward School is kind of really focusing on as well, in order to propel businesses forward. And of course, we can ask digitally savvy employees to train leaders and colleagues who are less tech fluent, and of course make certain geographically dispersed teams to know how to use collaboration tools to stay connected. So these are very simple ways in which that organizations can embrace this disruption, which brings me to the next point of basically embracing disruption, right? I think we need to come to a point where we will need to teach ourselves as well as our leaders to think in a more systemic, strategic, and interdependent ways, right? by expanding their capacity to work innovatively within disruptive situations. I think a lot of us, in Penang, we are known to be people who are resilient. I believe so, and I think this pandemic has truly tested all of us by really forcing us to expand our capacity to work innovatively within this disruption. And of course, to offer challenging experiences that open them up to new opinions, right, and new perspective and new ways of seeing the world. So I think these are some of the things that I'm seeing, companies and as well as the companies that we are consulting with. This is what they are doing. This is what we are encouraging them to do. And it's not just for companies in Penang, but I think globally we are innovating within this structure.
So apart from the soft skills that you think are essential for the development of talent, what specifically are the core technology skill sets that you are developing in Forward School itself? Apart from, let's say, data analytics, AI, is there any specific technology area that is in demand that you're really thinking that we should be focusing on?
I think in Penang specifically, because of our background in machines, and what I mean by machines is generally semicon and electronics sector, and Penang being a very thriving ecosystem in that. A lot of these companies are particularly moving into areas such as deep learning, specifically more on like vision learning. A lot of these machines, for example, like Vitrox, one of our partners, they are one of the world leaders when it comes to vision machine learning, where they use, where their machines in terms of the softwares are able to use machine learning in terms of vision to detect the board, right, as part of a testing process. And they are one of the highest, better performing stock in Bursa Saham. So what we are seeing is, in general, is Penang, yes, semicon, electronics, but a lot of these companies, SMEs and MNCs, will have to transform digitally. So a lot of them are moving towards cloud computing. A lot of them are moving towards data science, towards deep learning specifically, as they try to not just deal with just machines, but nowadays machines are more often than not connected to the internet, and they'll be able to manage their machines well, diagnose their machines well, even remotely anywhere. One of the areas that we are getting a lot of inquiries on is basically the lights off factory. Basically, the idea of a lights off factory is basically how do you keep the factory running, right, without any employees being present in the factory. And I'm encouraged to see how our SMEs and are picking these things up and are being hungry to learn more and are wanting to upskill and reskill their current workforce to take on this challenge.
Right, excellent. So there's a lot of heritage from the manufacturing factories and the engineering skills that we have, and we are basically leveraging them and moving into AI, into other machine language and deep learning stuff, which is excellent, and the skill pool that we have, that we're extending into. I guess, do you see that, in this COVID environment, that people are all working a lot from home? So like Hamdan, do you see that, what are the challenges with that in terms of people working from home, or even the idea of a physical hub is now becoming more virtual? How does Penang position itself for that? You're on mute.
This is one of the big questions that arises, in a sense that, with COVID, does our lives change permanently? And in what ways that the future would look like meaning that, would we all be virtual, that we will not be interacting with one another, and we are happy to sit with our phones and computers, and we can interact, buy, sell, and even meet family on the computer. The reality, unfortunately, is that we are human beings, and we like physical interaction. As much as we are talking about tech here and so on, it is, I think, the physical interactivity that innovation and creativity comes. The tech part of it is all what I call it, given the fact that that's basically mechanical skill sets. In fact, tech services eventually become the new blue collar in the future, whereby it's a given skill set you do at your own time. But it is the innovation and creativity is actually in the space where people are actually interacting and engaging, and I think more and more offices and others will take new form, and a lot more will be spent into creating social spaces, places for interaction and engagement, places for collaboration and co-creation, and so on. In fact, making it hubs with services and amenities. So the traditional offices will definitely undergo some form of disruption. And that disruption was already underway before COVID. With COVID, it's accelerating, and it will eventually find a stable state. I don't think it will become one where it will totally, the traditional offices will disappear. But I'm trying to answer your question in a different way. The reality is that there would be a balance whereby that people will have some time at home, they would have flexible hours, but eventually we're going to see more and more people invest in core hours for collaboration and co-creation. Because I think that's where the value add eventually is going to come. So you're going to see that eventually the work hours would be, or the interaction hours would be between 10 to 2, 6 to 10 at night kind of stuff. And then in between you go back and do your work on your own private time and so on. And the whole new behavioral norm will emerge. A lot of what we see today in terms of work hours has come from the industrial age, whereby we had a discipline of making sure that we had workers for factories. So we all wear uniforms, we follow a particular hours, and human beings made to become robots working 24/7. And I think with this work from home, that notion has been undermined. And earlier Howie talked about no light factories and so on. The reality is that those functions will be taken up by machines, and a lot more human actions will be more in focus in terms of what we do more productively. So we are at a point of disruption and an inflection, and not only disruption, but rather an inflection point. So places like Penang, I think the fundamental is the question is that, are we prepared to ride the wave of the future? 50 years ago, we rode the wave of attracting offshoring companies, creating free trade zone, and embracing the whole idea of moving up the value chain. Most of the old money, sorry, Mei Tan, but most of the old money in Penang never believed in the offshoring businesses. And in fact, they never got into the whole area of investing into the tech firms. A lot of the tech spillovers has come from engineers who were successful in the companies eventually going out to do startups, as opposed to actual funded by old money. Because people want old money, want some high level of certainty as opposed to taking the high level of risk. So similarly, what we see is that in this new environment, who would be the risk takers, and who would be prepared to be the disruptors, and how do we embrace a new future? And for places like Penang, the question is that to what level we are prepared to take the risk and embrace a new future. And that means that making Penang to be 5G ready, to make Penang a gigabit city, to make Penang tech ready hub. That means in the old days we had factories or free trade zones. Here we need to have hubs that are created with digital status or with the right infra and so on, so that people can come and do a plug and play. And the more that we make it enabling, the more likely that Penang will be successful. I believe, I think with your leadership, Tony, that we are set on the right direction to ride that wave, because I think that's the first thing is to have a dedicated entity that will commit itself to ensure that Penang will digitize. And I think Penang has committed to step forward in that journey to digitize. Now, the challenge is that how fast and at what cost, and how can we make this happen sooner than later? Because the earlier we are, it always says that what you call, competition is as such. The first movers always take the bigger share. And similarly, I think we were the first few cities. In fact, we were the pioneers together with Singapore on offshoring 50 years ago, and we took a larger share than others. And we had a head start across ASEAN. And similarly, I think we are well positioned to do the same and provide leadership for the nation.
Right. So I think just associated into that question about offshoring, then, I mean, like you said, 50 years ago, we had what do we call the 8 samurais that came to Penang and set up the factories. And then as a result of that, 50 years later, we had a very strong engineering ecosystem around that. If we are going to attract such similar anchors in the digital ecosystem, who is in your wish list, or what would be the kind of profile of this kind of companies that would come?
I think similarly, I think I would probably contextualize again to say that this is where we have, I think, just to like to share with the audience, that the state has taken leadership to look at similarly, like, we have to eventually, activities needs to hub in a location and needs to have a place where it starts from, or it's where it emerges from. It doesn't happen suspended in thin air. So the state has chosen this idea of looking at what we call the Penang Bay. Penang is a great place. It has got waterfront, water edges, and it's got island and the mainland, nature and everything else. So what we are looking at in Penang Bay is about harnessing the strengths of Penang and preparing our existing urban environment and regenerate and adapting it to the future. And in that way, that instead of building entirely a new digital hub, tech hub in somewhere, a totally new space that will take 10, 20 years, we are trying to use our existing urban spaces in Georgetown, Butterworth, which is the core part of the Penang Bay initiative, where we would locate and encourage a lot of these digital activities to take place. In terms of companies, I think we want to move away from the FANGs of the world. It's great to have the FANGs, but the FANGs, are not going to be the what you call the drivers in 2 or 3 decades from now. We need to find the Intel that starts up, that has got when he came to Penang was 4 years of age, or a Motorola or a HP that has got a great hunger and drive to build something substantially new within the Asia Pacific landscape. And I think that will emerge both, I think, from harvesting what we have already in our existing ecosystem, as well as I think there are some newer companies that are looking for attractive places where they have a right mix of talent access, as well as ecosystem services. I think the key now is how do we piece the different puzzles together. And I think that's a journey that we are just about to begin.
Okay, so Mei, how much of this heritage factor is a cool factor, for example, for the digital ecosystem? I mean, Georgetown is a real heritage area, is a UNESCO site. So how much of it is a cool factor for the digital ecosystem?
Well, I think, Georgetown being, like you say, is a cool factor, as a heritage. I mean, being in a heritage, I think, that kind of working lifestyle probably, we can really have it in any parts of the world. I think Penang has that, specific location in specific area. I think, but of course, I would want to say that being in that heritage area has its challenges as well. I started co-working space in Georgetown as well. So I think able to implement, high speed internet, to be inside a Georgetown could be one part of the challenge, I would say. But in terms of overall working lifestyle, where you can actually attract, we used to attract a lot more talents that like to be in Georgetown, just because of the environment and the easy access to all the locals, culture and food. Is where we can actually a lot more international expats actually love to work in that kind of environment. And I think for us, being in part of the heritage, we also need to preserve, the value of, the heritage and Penang and the working culture here, and at the same time combining with the new innovation and technology. This is where the bridge, I think, we have to look into the bridging the gap.
Right. So on the note about infrastructure, you know that the state has been piloting with some of the telcos to put fiber in the drain. So this has been piloted and is very successful. Without having to dig up the roads and stuff, they are piloting the fiber, piping it through the drains. So that's something that will be, I think, actively going to be rolled out after the pilot completes. And definitely that would solve a lot of the infrastructure challenges in heritage areas. So maybe I go back to Howie to ask you, why did you pick to set up your forward school in the heritage area? I mean, is that because your kind of students that would go there are attracted to that cool factor?
Yeah, I think it's the heritage area has been pretty alluring in many sense. Besides being cool and all that. And like what I've mentioned earlier, I've always liked to think of Georgetown having the power of the future, but also the romance of the past. And I think us Forward School being right here, in the middle of the heritage core, signals that. And I think in a lot of sense, a lot of at least my team and the people and the talents that we are attracting. They have a certain level of affinity to the area here, and it's much more lifestyle. So all the things that young people like, I mean the cafes and everything, it's here. Not that other areas of Penang is lacking of, but it gives a certain sense of a lifestyle that they are looking for. And obviously we collaborate with the Yap Choi Estate as well, which has been very supportive in terms of our efforts here in Forward School. And it is also part of our efforts to rejuvenate some of the older shop houses here. And I think Forward School is bringing something that is new, something that is not seen here in Georgetown. So we are very glad also to work together with the mayor, together with Pink City, together as part of the Penang Bay initiatives as well, to rejuvenate Georgetown and make it more livable, not just livable but thriving as well, as compared to just being a ghost town.
Right.
I think that Tony, if you don't mind, if I can add, one of the things that we look at is that Georgetown is like your asset and something to do with the old world charm. While there are challenges about how do you work in historical areas, it's not easy. But the old world charm has got a power of what you call attachment and a sense of place. So that creates a kind of human connection that deepens the kind of relationship with space. So we believe that Georgetown is a value-added proposition where it is, while people may want to be in ultra-modern spaces with the ultra-modern facilities, but we have seen in other places around the world where example would be like Station F, which is the world's largest startup hub. It is located in an old train station, 100-year-old train station that actually is used as a interesting new adaptive use of space. So I'm highlighting to say that there are plentiful examples of how people have taken advantage of historical assets and transform it. Because as I said earlier, cities are competing. And if you do not create distinction, then you are in the losing end, whereby you do not have a value-added proposition. And Georgetown is our asset that others cannot replicate. And the more that we enhance our asset, the more that it will eventually yield results and create a distinction for us as a value-added proposition. Because if we are creating this modern ultra towers, everybody can create it. But in the case of Georgetown, you have to work 200 years of history to build it back, and that's not going to happen. So I think that's where I think we look at how historical assets, historical urban fabrics are a key advantage. But it requires ingenuity and innovation about how we use the spaces in the new, to so that we can use it in the new, to fulfill our new needs.
Yeah, exactly my point to the state leadership about digital being a complement to physical, and that the physical environment and, like you said, the legacy and the heritage that we have, and we need to take advantage of it. And then basically, how do we then tap on it to create a digital ecosystem? Exactly the strategy and where we're moving towards. I want to come back to this point about the talent, Howie, and many investors have asked me about if they were to set up operations in Georgetown and in Penang, how do we ensure that we can attract, and not just attract, but retain talent, because you're creating the supply pool, but how do we make sure that we actually retain them in Penang? I mean, there are obviously competition in the region with Singapore, with Selangor, other states as well. So what do you think it needs to be done there, or are we doing?
I think for Penang, we know that we already have a fantastic business-friendly environment where companies and upstart can thrive, right? And I must say this, right? Whether a company can thrive or not, more often than not, it's not just the infra, right? It's also about the founders themselves. And Penang has shown to be a place where founders can thrive. And we have seen in the past, especially, and even right now, right, especially in the semicon electronics industry, and the up and coming global business services as a sector. Having said that, like what I've mentioned, I think that's also a tremendous growth opportunities in the digital and the software sector, which Forward School is kind of really focusing on and building up talent for. I think at the end of the day, I believe that we attract and retain by being relevant in today's world, our digital world, and providing our youth a platform for their aspirations. And I think that Penang do have all the ingredients to retain. I mean, at least in my short time here, I mean, 4 years if you consider that short, and in all of my interaction, I've not really experienced whereby people is complaining about high turnover rates. I think for Penang and those who choose to set up in Penang, who choose to grow in Penang, they are, I wouldn't say that they are a loyal bunch, but I think they are people who are rooted. And if you can cast an aspiring vision to your people, they are great followers as well as leaders.
Great.
If I can, Tony, if you don't mind,
yes.
And I just thought what was interesting to add to Howie's point is that my own observation is that over the last 5 decades, the issue of talent has never been a limiting factor that this, what they call, that's never enabled companies to grow. And the testimony of it is that we continue to attract both what I would call investment from overseas as well as investment from locally. And all of them continue to grow, thrive, and evolve. In fact, what started as a small ecosystem of a bunch of companies in the semiconductor space, today the depth, the ecosystem has become varied and has grown in its depth. From providing manufacturing to now to all the way from design services, shared services, and a very whole spectrum. And I also observed a number of companies that have startup. Example, I think I can highlight is that Opstar is a startup that provide design services. Started with 3 people. Today they have grown to more than 100 over people. Emulous, which was in the landscape, a couple of years ago, again be it they're providing hardware services or software, and even in animation, people like Lemon Sky who have set up a subsidiary in Penang, they also have now doubled up this. So what I see is that talent in Penang is not a limiting factor. Rather, it's like I call it, as long as you have the honey pot, the bees will come looking for it. What the challenge is that can we plant the flowers that will attract the bees and eventually create the honey pots and make this a hub and a home.
On that point, does that mean that this point about the fact that people tend to position ourselves and compete on wages, is that still fair that Penang should continue along that track, or do you think we have gone upstream in the value chain that we should actually be able to command relatively good wages?
I will say this, that obviously if you look at the household income data, our household income data is that Penang is definitely comes lower than Kuala Lumpur. At 10,800 is the household income. In KL, Penang is at 6,200. This is the median income, right? And if we want to make Penang competitive,
you're talking in ringgit, right?
Yeah, ringgit, and that number is really when you compare it to the international scale, it's actually very, very cheap. So that's one. Two is that I don't think we are competing on the basis of being cheap. It's about value at price, because we no longer are saying that this is a low cost hub. This is a value at price hub, whereby you are paying for efficiency, you're paying for productivity, you're paying for innovation, you're paying for creativity, and you're paying for ingenuity. And I think that's a testimony of how Penang has thrived, right? And I think we continue. I think it's a question, obviously, when you're starting a new industry, be it as a startup or as a offshoring company, there would be a learning curve. And usually the learning curve in Penang has been short, and we are able to quickly then improvise and adapt. And I think that has been a key success factor that is probably underappreciated, under-recognized. And in fact, most times people do not even consider that as a price differentiator, because in many other places you have high attrition. I think Howie, you said you don't see high attrition, high turnovers, and we don't see actually a huge outflow of talent from the ecosystem. Obviously, there are people who move to other places and so on, but it's more like they go into a circle and eventually they come back. And I think it's a question of how can we actually now what I call build the ecosystem, and the more we deepen the ecosystem, more it becomes attractive for others to come and be part of it.
Yeah, I think definitely the currency arbitrage, which is probably an advantage against other countries in the region, but definitely, I think, as you rightly pointed out, we definitely are moving up, and in terms of being a source of talent in design, ingenuity, and all that, yeah, which I think it's a very positive sign, and definitely something towards where we are trying to deepen the digital ecosystem. And so coming back to Mei, I guess I would like to ask you about what would you say to an investor or a venture capitalist about what will be the attributes of why invest in Penang, its digital ecosystem, versus, let's say, Slang or in Johor?
Well, I think, well, first of all, I think we can see some of this, successful startup from, just now you mentioned the first wave of the startup. Like I mentioned before, Penang has more entrepreneurship and business mindset driven. So it really helped, I think, Penang Night to really looking into carefully spending the money. Hence, in terms of burning rate is not too high and able to really sustain the business, and also looking into a more profitable type of business model. I think that is number one part that, Penang has that kind of characters and culture that allow us, to look into more entrepreneurship. And now VCs, are looking into more startups that are able to sustain and also scale at the same time. is no longer just focusing on skill and keep burning the the fund and all this capital. So I think this part has made Penang something different that VC actually can look into consideration. I think second part, I think in terms of Penang, just now we mentioned is a great place for deep tech, right, and hardware and IoT. And then we have few successful startups like VTrox, just now we mentioned that able to done the enterprise solution and also gone for for the IPO. So this is something that I think as a VC also I know some VC also looking into deep tech startup investment, that also can start looking into Penang as one of the hub where we have all the successful history and also some of the startups, and also from the like we mentioned engineering point of view, where some of these startups are and founders are already in their experience in the space of technology and especially manufacturing side. So where this can actually help on boosting the businesses and the startup into the next level. And B2B is something I think we can actually focus at. So I think for VC that interested in looking into more of like hardware, deep tech, type of startups, I think Penang has the advantage. Yeah.
Right. So I have lived in Taiwan before, and my observation is that the dream of the engineer is to, when he graduates, to open his own factory. I don't know about the choices here, but there is a perception that a lot of our young engineers and technologists, when they graduate, they just want to work for an MNC rather than to get into the entrepreneurship route. What is your observation about that? Do you think that is true?
Well, I think okay, my observation is partially true. It's because well, definitely for them to jump into a startup or actually after get graduated, sometimes it just need more experience before they can actually do that, right? And I think the support and also the experience, they might not think they have it, and usually people tends to want it a bit safer, right, to go through some sort of experience before they can jump straight to a startup. I think in terms of Penang mindset, we tend to able to I guess calculating the risk factor, to regarding this. But of course, we have few that actually after they gone through the corporate, or the manufacturing, and all the MNC, work that they have done, and they decided, they want to actually step up and to start their own business. And we see some of them as been, successful cases on that. Yeah.
Right. So Howie, do you see that? I mean, that the people who feel that it's a safer route to go down and work, take a job and MNC rather than to go down the entrepreneurship route?
I think I mean this can be subjective, but Penang has great talents, but at the same time, there is definitely an area of growth when it comes to being hungrier. Whether is it hungrier for knowledge, or whether is it hungrier to bring a certain level of impact, rather than just continuing on to work in a big company. But I think it's not something that is very specific to Penang, or it's a I think globally cities as well as countries are trying to encourage entrepreneurship, and likewise I think entrepreneurship is key to growth, especially in this period of time. But I'm continuing to see a lot more young people being interested in entrepreneurship. thanks to the FANGs, obviously, thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, thanks to Jack Ma, thanks to social media, uh, who has in certain ways made entrepreneurship sexy. Although I would always give them a heads up, right? That it's not all sexy. But I'm optimistic in terms of people stepping up onto the plate into entrepreneurship, because more often than not, those who step up and not just step up, they last for a period of time. They see a breakthrough. More often than not, these are awesome leaders, and we need these leaders to lead the pack. And I think we are seeing it right now.
All right, if I can make a slightly contrarian view, I just give you a recent Harvard Business Review study. It's debunking the myth of a young entrepreneur. The study says that the team analyzed the age of all business founders in the US in recent years. And they found out that the average age was 42. And similarly, there's another research done also similarly identifies to say that the entrepreneur is old, and the first startup, the average age of leaders, high growth startups is 45. And maybe it's like, oh, this is something maybe not commonplace known, but that's the reality, right? If you are doing startups, what does it mean? You're starting business, you need experience, you need some form of worldly understanding, you need skills, you need networks, you need an understanding of what you call ecosystems, the whole range of things that comes to make a startup. And that doesn't come at the day when you walk out. And I think while Mark Zuckerberg and others have made it as such, I don't think aspiring to be a Mark Zuckerberg when you're ill-equipped will yield success. In fact, it becomes a harder journey to succeed. Now, for those who can make it, great. But what I also say is that let's look at those pool of people who are in the mid-30s, who can be encouraged now to take a step out of the ecosystem and to do startups. So what we need to play the role is to how can we handhold and allow and encourage this type of people to step out. And like I said, the example was Opstar. Those engineers from Intel who stepped out. Similarly, I think there's another one called Xperia, who provide engineering services, who again, we worked with them and they stepped, in an environment where they face retrenchment, they moved on and did their own startups. And they're successful, in the sense that now there's very little people to go out there and celebrate and clearly encourage this pool of people to say, you got a great future ahead. By virtue of the fact that you already got a personal balance sheet, you already got networks, you've already got experience. Go ahead, take the risk and jump into it. And also, there's enough support that the country provides as a whole in terms of incentives and so on, that actually lowers the entry cost for anyone to participate. Now, that is what is not commonplace, and nobody celebrates that idea. That the average age of a startup is not necessarily at 20, but rather it's actually at 40. Maybe I'm in the 40s. Maybe I don't know whether I'm just saying that I'm also at the right time to go and do a startup. In fact, that's probably the time when I went ahead and started up Think City. It was at the age of when I was 38. And that's the kind of pathway that we all eventually. And I believe Howie, similarly, I mean, your pathways would have been similar and so on. So it's a counterintuitive perspective, because I think there's a lot of effort is put into it, saying, hey, you're 20 something, if you didn't do a startup, you're a failure in life. But there may be a different perspective that we may need to also look at and consider.
Yeah,
that's probably in Silicon Valley where there are a bit more ages, right?
Yeah, I have to agree with Hamdan. I mean, I'm 37 this year, and thanks for bringing up Xperia, because I did caught up with Eugene, right? A fantastic guy, has been thinking out of the box, and yeah, it's a great example of neat 30s 40s people coming out and venturing, and that's I must say I agree that it's not really celebrated in the sense, and I think we can do much more.
Or rather, I think that's probably going to be Penang's strength. In fact, if we push hard, and like I said, harvest the existing ecosystem, you can in fact have quickly build a pool of 100 companies that you can build as ecosystem service provider startups that has got a regional and a global marketplace.
Right.
This example would be Emulus, example would be Expedia, example would be Opstar. As I said, these are all very new companies that is over the last five over years have really grown and been.
It's very interesting that without government, I guess they are successful despite the lack of government support in that sense.
I don't know about its lack of government support. I think they benefit from government support because I think there's like the tax allowances, the startups and so on. I think government should not be an obstacle.
Right. And do you think that
Yep.
Are we too overly regulated in terms of encouraging entrepreneurship, incentives that are there?
I think if you compare what is available in Malaysia, we are force feeding, spoon feeding, and creating all kinds of fallback positions and support and so on, because that's a desire. People just take that risk and accept the fact that failure is part of life, and they start up again. So in the negative sense, that the fact that government is doing a lot is becoming like a barrier to encourage people to take risk. Sense of hunger. Not everyone is not. So what happens is that with all of this support and so on, the wrong people try to do startups, or wrong people go into becoming an entrepreneur, and they fail, and then eventually it discourages those who potentially could have done it. So I think we just need to be nuanced about understanding about how we use incentives and grants and other tools.
What about incentives to investors, for example? Do you see a difference between a digital services investor versus, let's say, a brick and mortar manufacturing type of investor?
I will probably say that that the obviously between a digital service investor and a guys with the factory and so on, the amount of incentive needed to support a digital investor is much lower. And the type of incentive support is not on the hardware, but rather it's on the human capital and probably helping them get started more than on a long-term continued support. In the manufacturing world, you may need a lot more continued support. In the digital world, once they are able to make money and so on, we should not be there as governments subsidizing, because if we are subsidizing and they are here on the basis of subsidy, then it's not sustainable. So whatever incentive that we are providing is actually just to get them started and to do like a bridge, so that whatever time lost in terms of building the human capital and get operationalizing is what the incentive should go towards. And a lot of companies that are offshoring here, I think the way that we should look at them is that they have got a ready market and a marketplace. They are using this as a hub with the right tapping into the ecosystem, and that's what we want to make a value proposition. If we are providing incentives and we are subsidizing them, then we are in the wrong game, because it's a bottomless pit, because companies will continue to suck you out, and eventually you end up becoming the loser.
Mei, you have something to add around this?
Yeah, what I think, the other parts that I want to say is that, for instead of looking at incentive, like just now, just now Hamdan had said that, when we give too much or spoon feeding, because I had our incubator program here. So, when before anyone started this program, we actually briefed them on the journey as an entrepreneur. So, if we are spoon feeding them for everything they need, then, the success rate will be pretty low, because, they are just waiting. So the hunger that we don't really, we need to encourage more of that, I think in Penang. And secondly, I think what really need help is, instead of, giving incentive, another way we can actually, connecting them to, or, bigger companies or bigger, market. I think at the end of the day, you don't give them, the fish. You need to, teach them how to fish, right? For them to able to sustain their own business. So in my point of view, from traditional business or startup, to me, foundation of business and doing business itself, still have to be sustainable, still need to be profitable, and we just have to, have that kind of mindset to figure our way out, instead of just waiting for, the government to help us or feed us. I mean, the support is important. It's just about what kind of support actually would be more helpful in the long term. Yeah.
Right. It's been very interesting conversation. So I'd like to bring up one last slide, which is to show our current ecosystem of the startups that we have, as well as some of the key players. This is not in the electric E&E manufacturing side, but more in the digital space. And then get you guys to share your opinions about why Penang. Host, can you please put up this slide? Right, so this is a slide about Penang, the Penang Bay. It's like what Hamdan you've talked about. There is a nucleus of a growing digital ecosystem that we have. I mean, on the left side, you see all the past successes in wave one that we talked about. And then we've got new companies like Forward School, Telebot, all that coming up. And then on the right side, you see the newer startups that are coming up. And like I've said, a lot of them are in AI, they are in warehouse robotics, they are in the vision technology, and all that space. So and in IoT as well. So one last round of comments from each of you in terms of the ecosystem and why Penang.
Go ahead, Mei Tan.
Yeah. Well, and for me, pretty quick one. As in, I moved back from the state back to Penang. So over the years, I grew to fall in love with this Penang. With the good balance of lifestyle, and I think this is a good place to actually try out a lot of solution before actually you can go outside of Penang. So in my opinion, that is a good place to kickstart. With a lower cost to do that as well, and with the talent pool that we have. So yeah.
I probably say that. I probably say that the fact is that Penang is definitely a value at price. In fact, I think it's very highly competitive out there. But it combine that together with the high quality of life and access to global markets and global ecosystem. Puts Penang in the right position. Now, I think it's about accelerating it, enhancing it, and deepening it. And we have got a lot of it in the already present. How do we take advantage of what we have so that we can build the future that we aspire to? So I would definitely say that our glass is not half empty, rather it's half full. And I think we are at the right place, right moment. With the COVID crisis and acceleration of the digital world, we are right place to take the leap, and hopefully that do it sooner than later.
Yeah, I would add on to say, I can't find much of good reasons of why not. So I would say that I think Penang is a fantastic place where you can root yourself. Like what Hamdan said, the quality of life is there. And as you root yourself here locally, it's also a very fantastic place to be thinking regionally and globally. For example, like PictoChart and the many startups that we have here, they serve a global market, and we have seen that it is definitely possible.
Right, and I think absolutely agree with you guys that Penang definitely has the key ingredients. We have the entrepreneurship, we have the livable environment that is thriving, and then we also have a talent pool that is growing. And definitely we've already proven with our track record in terms of engineer entrepreneurs who have started up and become successful. And now we're seeing new waves, a new generation of technologist entrepreneurs, right, which is very encouraging and definitely the way we want to go in terms of the digital space and
we have now the confidence with digital Penang providing the leadership to harness, bring everyone together to build this whole ecosystem and make it a reality.
Never mind the pressure, Hamdan. We will do our best. Yes, thank you so much, guys, for joining this conversation.
Thank you.
And host, is there any questions? If not, I think we'll reach the end of the session. And thank you very much. And I hope our audience enjoyed this discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Many thanks to our moderator as well as our speakers for sharing and for the presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of day 3 for Digital Investment Summit at MTM 2020. We hope you enjoyed listening to our speakers and panelists and inspired you to do better at whatever you do in the digital economy industry. We invite our participants to join us as we resume our agenda tomorrow at 10 a.m. You are welcome to reach out to our event admin via the chat box for any form of assistance you require. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we end day 3 with a high note and immeasurable thanks. Stay tuned and see you tomorrow.